Okay, here's my intro. Let me just erase that right there and go simple. My name, A-Z. No, I don't like that. A-Z-I-Z-A-K-I-B-I-B-I. Hey, hey, hey. I'm Aziza Kibibi and welcome back to my channel. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you enjoy videos on exploring the human experience, if you are a survivor of whatever traumatic experience that life happened to have thrown at you, and if you would like to know how to take lemons and make them into lemonade, then this is where you should be. As I said before, I'm Aziza Kibibi and I have survived quite a bit of abuse at the hands of my biological father, which resulted in 4 children from him. I talk about the things that I have experienced, usually in great detail, though YouTube sometimes be trying to, hush me as far as that's concerned. But really just how I have processed what has happened to me, how I've managed, how I raised my children, how I've created this amazing life that I have for myself. Because it was a long road. During the process of escaping my father, I lost my children to social services. I had to get them back. I had to then establish myself and my family. I had to put them into school. Since I was homeschooled, I knew nothing about the process. Eventually ended up testifying against my father in court. So that's just a quick rundown for those of you who don't know. And as I said before, if you are about talking about important issues, if you would like tips, hacks, insight, motivation, inspiration on navigating and surviving this human experience, then this is the place to be. So make sure you subscribe so you can get updates when I post new videos, on new shorts, new stories, and new community posts. Okay, so let's just jump right into this video. My experience suffering abuse from my father was a lot. It was a lot, and it impacted the adult that I am today. He started molesting me when I was 8 years old, and that everything that he put me through, of course, has had an impact in the choices that I make, how I respond to certain things in my life, how I interact with people. And I want to focus this video on female abusers. The statistics dictate that most child abusers, most pedophiles are male, but as I said in many of my other videos about statistics, they are based on what is reported. And the way our society looks at the abuse of boys is different from the way it looks at the abuse of girls. So while 1 in 4 girls, based on reports, have been molested before they turn 18, 1 in 6 boys have been molested before they turn 18, based on reports. Interestingly enough, the perpetrator in those reports are mostly men, which then, of course, you do the math, that adds to the amount of child abusers that are male. Actually, it's over 90%. 90% of abusers are male. Now, there are female abusers. Yes, of course there are, because there are women who also have certain desires or are attracted to children. But those incidents are not reported as much because the way our culture has approached boys, and when boys enter puberty and they become sexually active, the expectations of boys and their sex life is different from the expectation of girls and their sex lives. So oftentimes, if an older woman or a girl interacts inappropriately with a boy, with an underage male, it is not really considered in the mind of one, the child, and in their family and in our culture, it's not really considered abuse. Boys are considered lucky if they have sex early or they have sexual encounters early in their life. So, I mean, I don't know about you moms out there, but if any girl was to touch my boy, some older woman was to touch my boy, my kid, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's a violation. In my opinion, and of course, according to the laws, it is a violation. It is an adult taking advantage of a child. But culturally, how we look at it, that's not really the case because the boy is considered lucky. Now, in my experience with a woman abuser, it was my dad's girlfriend. Her name is Akua Montano. And I make it a point to name these pedophiles and these abusers to bring light to the things that they did. She is registered on the National Sex Offenders List, so you can look her up. But she started molesting me with my father when I was 10. So I was very young. She was a willing participant. She was excited about it. And it just speaks to how a woman can do something as disgraceful as taking advantage of and exploiting a child sexually, just like a man can. Now, it is less likely to happen, but it can happen. And as the representative and the founder of my nonprofit organization, Precious Little Ladies Incorporated, it's important for us to look at abusers in general and not just focus on a male abuser. Now, while the needs, the quote unquote needs and approaches to male abusers may be slightly different because of their gender compared to women, the problem is still the same. We have an adult taking advantage of a child, whether they are male or female. Okay, so this woman, Akua, I write extensively about her in my book, Unashamed, A Life Tainted, volumes 1 and 2. So make sure, if you haven't already, if you haven't purchased my book, go check it out. You can find it at azizakibibi.com. Also, it's available on Amazon. And if you have already, if you have read my book, please go down into the comments and share with me your thoughts, specifically about the part that I'm about to speak about now. Akua was my father's girlfriend. I knew her, I feel like, for most of my childhood. From when I was very young, my father, even though he was married to my mom, he was polygamous. He deemed himself a polygamist. So he had girlfriends. I grew up with multiple women in and out of the house. I grew up with the knowledge that while my mom was my dad's wife, there were other women that he had personal relationships with. And in many cases, my mom had relationships with these women as well. They were friends. So oftentimes, the house was boisterous and lively, and my parents would have dinner parties. And, in many ways, it was exciting. But Akua, she herself was abusive, and she used to sneak and abuse my brother and I. Before I was old enough, well, technically, my father left me home with my siblings at 9 years old. But before then, before he felt that I was old enough to be left home alone, some of his girlfriends would be babysitters for us if him and my mom would go out. So Akua oftentimes was our babysitter over the weekends, and she was very strict. She made us clean the house. Well, we had to clean the house anyway, we know that, but she was extremely strict in the fact that she would come after we dusted and use her finger and wipe to see if there was any dust. She would look at the mirrors and the windows under damn near a microscope. It looked like she would get really, really close and pick every dust and smear and anything that she felt was not clean enough. And she would make us clean all over again. Not just a spot. We had to clean the whole thing over again. And when she would find the issue, she would take her skin, particularly mine's, my brother's, because my other siblings, they were really young. One of them was a baby. And she would take our skin and she would twist it. Oh my gosh, it was so painful. And I remember getting extremely angry when I would see her do it to my brother. So I felt like, okay, there was like this weird place because my dad's girlfriends were like, I don't know, it was almost like they could do no wrong, because by then my father was already abusive to my mom, but I had never seen him be abusive to his girlfriends. In this case, I just knew that if I told Daddy that Cool was hurting us, then he would handle it. Well, I did tell him, and he completely ignored it. So there was already this tumultuous relationship. I just didn't like her. Me or my siblings just didn't like her. So when the day came, I'm 10 years old, and my father decided to include her in him raping me. It brought my already disdain for what I was going through, my hate and my sadness for what I was going through. It took it to a whole nother level, because here I was, I had no choice in what was happening to my body as far as my father was concerned. And now here was a person that I did not like involved in this activity dealing with my body that I had no control over. I had no say in. I felt like I was just a piece, an object for these two adults. And here I am, a child. Can you imagine, 10 years old? These two adults to just use as a toy. But here's the thing. For those of you who has experienced childhood abuse and can understand how overwhelming it is to have someone that is so much bigger and more powerful than you make you and force you to do things that you don't want to do. In this situation, my father was already rough. He was huge. He was a 28, 29-year-old man. I was a frail child. And I didn't like anything. I didn't like when, I didn't like anything that he did. And when he was on top of me, it was like he was crushing me. So for now a woman to come along and kiss me, and I'm a child, remember that, y'all. You have to make sure you keep in mind, it's not me, it's not the woman that you see here. This is a very small, thin, I was very thin for my age, child, who knew very little of the world except what her daddy told her. And when this woman kissed me, honestly, it was a relief, because it wasn't rough and scratchy like my dad's. It was soft and gentle. And even though I did not like her as a person on a regular day-to-day basis, you want to talk about having to choose the lesser of two evils? That was an experience. I truly know what it's like to have bad and have to choose the one that's not so bad. Because in this situation, when a woman kissed me, I have formulated a preference. I had decided that I preferred, if I was going to be in this situation, I preferred her to kiss me over my father kissing me. And that's kind of how I settled into that situation. I'm going to talk about in another video how my mom found out, because I'm sure you all will have questions about what my mother said about now. My father was not only having this activity with me, but he had also brought another adult into the situation, if you want to call it a situation. I'm gonna do that in a future video. So yeah, make sure you subscribe so you'll be notified when I post that video, because that was a whole other experience in itself, as is everything when my mom found out every stage of what my father was doing to me. But I chose to talk about this topic because women abusers are not spoken about enough. When we picture child molestation, we immediately think men, and justly so. Most child molesters are men. Those definitely who are convicted are men. And even the women that we see that are convicted and are shown in the media, usually it is at the behest of a man. Like a man was telling them what to do. And oftentimes they cry, you know, he made me do it. So, while technically that was the case with Akua, trust, she was willing. She did not have to be forced. She did not question anything. My father didn't make her. He didn't hit her. He didn't do anything to her. You know, she was not coerced, shall I say. She willingly wanted to abuse me in that way. As I shared earlier, clearly she was abusive in general before the sexual activity, and she just seemed very, very, very pleased with what my father had presented her with, which was me. So when we think about and we talk about abusers, we do have to take into consideration that they are male and female. There might be underlying reasons at this day and time, at this point in time. I don't really care about the underlying reasons why they do what they do. Maybe we'll explore that in the future through the research that Precious Little Ladies does. But for now, the impact on a person's life just is way more important. It's way more important. My experience there with a woman, having a woman abuse me, of course it affected my relationships with women, because I saw a female from a completely different perspective. Well, I saw a female from a perspective that I don't think many people sees a woman. And that is in this position of victimizing someone, victimizing a child, victimizing a girl. And she had kids. So at the time, I think she had one child. Though at the time that the abuse was happening, I did find respite in those moments that Akua was involved, for two reasons. One, because she was gentler than my father, and two, I mean, we know how threesomes work. He had someone else to take his attention away from me. And I was, in a very weird and unfortunate way, grateful for that. So just including that in everything else that I have experienced, I have to be careful and cognizant on how these experiences impacts my relationships with other people. And it took some time to kind of navigate everyone socially, period. When I escaped my father, yeah, that I felt no safety even with people of the same sex, because of not only that situation, but then also I did not have an ally in my mom. But I'm past a lot of that now, and gratefully to the justice system, to the judicial system, Akua did serve 5 years in prison in exchange. It was a plea bargain in exchange for her testifying against my father. And I actually ran into her one time at school. I did not expect that, because apparently when she was released and she was going through the whole halfway house thing, she was a part of a program that allowed her to go to college. And the college that she was going to happened to be the same one I was going to. And I thought, you ever have those moments when, even though you don't see a person, you feel like you can feel their energy in the room. And then when you look around for them, you see them. So here I was sitting in the cafeteria at Essex County College. And for some reason, out the blue, I felt an energy walk behind me at a distance of someone that was familiar, and the image of her face popped in my mind. I looked around, but aside, I didn't see anybody right away, so I didn't think nothing of it. So I didn't pay it any mind. I just thought, well, it was just my brain. Then I went to the bathroom. And I'm there, I came out the stall and I'm washing my hands, and guess who walks out of the other stall? Yes, it was Akua. Now this is the thing. The last time I'd seen her, no. I was gonna say I was a child, but I think what it was mentally, I still felt like a child. I felt like a child for so long, and that is one thing that childhood trauma does. It can keep you stuck in your childhood. And though I have matured as a woman and I have the mind of a woman, sure, there are things that I feel like are childlike that I'm drawn to. I interact with young people very easily, and I believe that it is because I missed out on such a huge part of my childhood experiencing these really adult things. So I do gravitate towards things that are fun. Like I love comic books, I love roller coasters, things like that. I will always have a special place in my heart for My Little Ponies. But in my mind, because she was an adult and she's a short statured woman. I think she's only 5 feet. So I am taller than her. And I grew taller than her even at the time that my father was still in control and holding me captive and abusing me. But when I saw her come out of that stall, she seemed so tiny. She seemed so small and frail. And it wasn't that she looked the same in general. She was healthy. I mean, I realize that prison probably does not have the healthiest food, and you do lose weight when you go there, but she just seemed extremely small to me. And I think that it was my mentality and my perspective of her had grown and had been liberated so much by that point that when I saw her, that fear of her being an adult that was taking advantage of me was gone. And honestly, all I felt for her was pity. And I looked at her and she froze once she realized it was me. And I said, Akua? And she totally froze. And I was like, wow, I thought that was you. And she didn't say anything. And then I said to her, I could just see her shock in her face, in her eyes. And I said to her, I want to let you know that I forgive you. And she immediately burst out in tears and fell to her knees and just thanked me over and over and over again. And I left her where she was, and I haven't seen her since. Though I did hear that she went to an event that my niece was performing at, which I was like, well, if she's on the registered sex offenders list, why is she allowed out of school? I get a lot of messages from women who have been abused by men. But I don't really hear much from men who were abused by women, although I do know some men personally, and that is how I could speak towards the cultural perspective of how males see women abusers of children when they are males. When they are males. It's a lot. It's a lot. But I'm working on it. We're working on it. We have to work on it. Well, on that note, thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe. Again, hit that like button and go down in the comments and talk about this. Let's talk about this, people. Thank you again. I'm Aziza Kibibi, and see you in the next video. Be blessed, for you are a blessing. Bye.